Did President Nayib Bukele wage a war with the IMF? Well, one could call it that, but it seems like Bukele is playing chess while the IMF is playing checkers. Let's dive into what that means and what El Salvador has been doing with the IMF. Well, many of you know that El Salvador has made Bitcoin legal tender, and that did not sit well with the IMF. So recently, the IMF reached a staff level agreement with El Salvador on an extended fund facility agreement. So what all does that mean, and what all does that entail for El Salvador? Well, it entails some slight changes to their legal tender law when it comes to Bitcoin. Now, let's dive in to the differences here. So the IMF and the El Salvadoran authorities reached a staff level agreement on a new arrangement under the IMF Extended Fund Facility, the EFF, for about 1.4 billion here to support a government's reform agenda. The agreement is subject to the IMF Executive Board approval, and the project aims to strengthen fiscal and external feasibility through implementation of ambitious, growth-friendly fiscal consolidation plan. And meanwhile, their Bitcoin-related risks are being mitigated. So this is the big key right here, that the acceptance by the private sector will be voluntary, and the public sector participation in Bitcoin public relations will be confined. Now, with all that, what does that mean? We've got the my boy Peruvian Bull here in the chat, where he's asking, will the IMF force Bukele to close the Chivo wallet? I think so. I think that a government-run wallet will be, moved and changed here. But in the interim, they're just forcing they're forcing businesses to not be forced to accept Bitcoin. Now, a private sector, companies, if you go to certain areas in El Salvador, they might not necessarily be able to utilize or they might not accept Bitcoin. Now, if you go to places like El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, El Tunco, there's spot restaurants here or there that accept Bitcoin. I'd say maybe a good 10 to 20% of merchants in the country accept Bitcoin. So although, in the private sector, it was rumored that they were forced to accept Bitcoin, in practice, that has not been really sustainable here. But what the IMF is doing here is they're saying essentially the IMF does not need to accept, or that El Salvadorians do not need to accept Bitcoin as legal tender. It cannot be forced upon them if they do not wish to do so. But like I said, in practice, they have not been forced necessarily to do that. Now, with all this gives the El Salvadorian government a $1.4 billion loan to support the government's reform agenda. Now, the IMF has been putting pressure on El Salvador to reverse this Bitcoin legal tender law, and they've been putting pressure on it for quite some time, right? So what did this entail, right? So El Salvador agreed to scale back its crypto agenda. Now, see, this is where you can tell that, this article and the propaganda being put out by this, they don't necessarily understand what's going on here, because they're categorizing it as a crypto agenda in exchange for $1.4 billion loan from the IMF, marking a shift in the country's quest to become a global cryptocurrency hub. Now, with all this, the loan will be dispersed over 40 months to support El Salvador's economic reforms, securing the deal balance at cost. Now, what has El Salvador been doing with this money? And, what are some of the changes that have been done? Well, it seems like not a lot of changes have been done, because it seems like, El Salvador and Nayib Bukele have been upping their daily purchases of Bitcoin. So previously, Nayib Bukele would buy 1 Bitcoin every single day and continue that. But since that day, since they started getting in that loan, they've been buying 11 Bitcoin, right? So they bought 11 Bitcoin on this day here. It seems like, Nayib Bukele is buying more Bitcoin with an IMF loan, and I find that pretty comical to see here. But on top of all that, right? So not only are they using that, the entirety of this loan, but they're purchasing more and more Bitcoin here every single day, and it continues to be on that run up, right? So they're utilizing this IMF loan to buy more Bitcoin, and it seems like that is going to be the continued trend here, where the IMF is trying to slap El Salvador on the wrist here, but it's funny how tides have turned, right? I mean, previously the IMF, if you look at this date here, October 13th, 2023, said the recent El Salvadoran mission was very productive, that their IMF engagement with El Salvador has been very productive following a recent visit of the negotiation team, but agreement has not there yet on the new financing program. Now, it seems like this has been in the works for quite some time, and it's not just a spring of the moment kind of thing. The IMF has decided to give El Salvador some assistance and money here in the recent days. But it was not always the case to be thought that, El Salvador is, necessarily going to receive this loan and what it is for now. But the big thing was that the Washington-based lender agreed for a loan over 40 months, and it cited it's improving the fiscal situation, growing the economy, and bringing down inflation, and managing its near-term debt obligations. Now, in 2021, they put the government at odds with the IMF, sparking credit downgrades, spooking investors, and sending prices for bonds into a tailspin. While it still needs the okay funds from the executive board, the deal would bring a conclusion of long vested investors. Now, with all this being said, Bukele has been somewhat controversial when it comes to the IMF because of his Bitcoin policy. Now, on the flip side of things, it's been very successful. El Salvador has been buying Bitcoin since 2021, and seemingly, every single day that has been increasing. They're widely in the black now, in the positive space because of the recent run up, and I look for that to continue to run up here, especially with the price action that we all anticipate here for Bitcoin. So let's dive into some of the differences here just to highlight what will be. But so like the main difference, like I highlighted before, was that Salvadorian virtues will no longer be compelled to accept Bitcoin as a means of payment. Now, they may soon strike a deal with the IMF, involved El Salvador making Bitcoin acceptance voluntary instead of compulsory, and El Salvador stands to gain access to that 3.3 billion in loans from the IMF. Now, they've only received that 1.4 through the table so far, but the 3.3 seems to be coming. Now, it is interesting with this loan deal that they've accepted, and it seems like more and more have been, deployed here. And it seems like Nayib Bukele is utilizing that money to continue to buy Bitcoin here, where, they're not really necessarily slowing down. Even Nayib Bukele is highlighting that he is, continuing to buy more Bitcoin with this tweet very much here, almost like a slap in the face, where you see these recent run-ups here, right? So two big purchases recently where Nayib Bukele bought 11 Bitcoin here, and then another $1 million worth of Bitcoin on this other day here. So, it seems like Nayib Bukele is seemingly smash buying Bitcoin and continuing to double down on his Bitcoin stance. Now, my buddy Luke here in chat is asking, ¿Por qué tú no hablando en español? Man, I guess we'll have to be working on our Spanish together when we're in Colombia there, Luke, because mine's not up to par to be able to talk fully in depth just yet about Spanish, but hopefully I could get there pretty quickly here. But regardless, what El Salvador is doing and what Nayib Bukele is doing here is absolutely incredible. He's doubling down on his Bitcoin buy, and I think that that's going to, continue here. And Bukele has even doubled down on it as well. If I could get this ad out of the way, El Salvador says that it'll keep buying Bitcoin despite its IMF warning, right? So El Salvador said on Thursday it would keep buying Bitcoin, possibly at an accelerated pace, a day after the government reached a financing agreement with the International Monetary Fund. And that has said it should limit the exposure, or that said it should limit the exposure to cryptocurrency. So, good friend of the program, Stacy, as El Salvador's National Bitcoin Office Director, wrote on X that Bitcoin will remain legal tender in Central America and El Salvador, and that the government will keep adding to its strategic reserves. And by the looks of it, it seems like it would be hard to deny that this is going to be the truth here, that, El Salvador is going to slow down its buying. And it looks like, because Bukele, of his international relationships, everything that he's doing will continue that pace. I mean, it's been very successful for them so far. They've seen a complete turn in El Salvador. Complete rebranding is what many are categorizing it as, where we've seen, crime go down to an extremely low rate, thus, resulting in a lot of tourism kind of increasing there. And because of Bitcoin, a lot more attention has been on El Salvador opposed to, previous times. And other countries are taking notice here too. One of the other main countries is Argentina. We've had Argentina now reaching an agreement with, potentially with El Salvador, where he's been actively engaging in discussions with over 25 countries to forge a cryptocurrency partnership. I imagine that's going to be Bitcoin only, but this article is putting in here cryptocurrency. So I imagine it is going to be one. But Argentina is one country that really stands out here. And for that reason, it's because of Javier Milei. Javier Milei has been flipping Argentina on its head. It's gone from the Argentinian peso to now becoming a dollarized country. And I think the next step, which will occur, in some time here in the near future, will be to move towards a Bitcoin standard. But in the interim, we're reaching a dollarized Argentina, which is helping with a lot of the hyperinflation that we're facing. Regardless, we're seeing Argentina start to partner with El Salvador and Bukele. So this initiative is part of El Salvador's broader strategy to promote global adoption and regulate cryptocurrency, as El Salvador has become the first nation to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. So El Salvador has been a pioneer, making Bitcoin legal tender, and it's expanding its influence. And so I think Argentina seems like just the right fit here. It seems like it makes all too much sense as to why to bring in Bitcoin as legal tender, right? So I think that this is going to continue. I think not only will El Salvador discuss with Argentina, but they'll start to discuss with many more countries around the globe, right? I mean, they have 25, but the biggest one that they named here, or the one that they put in writing here, is Argentina. So I think that's also because Juan Carlos Reyes of National Digital Assets in El Salvador announced signing of a mutual collaboration here. So this was the first one to come across the line, was with Argentina, where it seems like 24 other countries are in talks. And this, I think, is a huge aspect of trade here, where El Salvador seeks to do cross-border collaboration to further crypto adoption. Now, will this cross-border mean some sort of cross-border trade, something along those lines? I'm not sure. That's all speculation at this point. But I think it is interesting that, with the way that the IMF has reacted previously, that we're still seeing some other countries very curious about Bitcoin, curious about what the benefits are. And, despite, maybe it's due to some of the marketing tactics that, Nayib Bukele has been dunking on a lot of the critics here, seeing the positives on their, holdings here, and seeing it continue to raise up in the fiat nominal terms. But in all of this, this is not the first time that the IMF has sent aid to El Salvador, but it is the first time that El Salvador has received aid from the IMF and is using it to buy Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's not uncommon. Now we're seeing a $3.3 billion loan, but previously during that COVID pandemic, we were seeing a loan of $389 million. So it seems like the IMF is looking at rapid financing agreements, or was previously in 2020. But it seems like they believe for some reason that they're in more of a debt crisis or more of a crisis now than they were during the COVID pandemic. So as my buddy Jim in the chat from Cascader saying, Bitcoin cannot be stopped. Bukele cannot be stopped. And I couldn't agree more. It seems like, El Salvador continues to buy. He continues to push this forward. And the IMF is urging him to stop, right? I mean, we had a $389 million disbursement during COVID when literally the entire globe shut down. And now, just to get them to stop using Bitcoin and to try to deter them, they're literally giving them nearly 4 times the amount to tell them, hey, stop using Bitcoin, stop forcing Bitcoin as legal tender here. So it's interesting the timing of all this. It's interesting seeing that the differences in just merely 4 years makes. But I mean, if we look at it in hindsight here, I mean, we might as well just pack it up, as we might say here in the Bitcoin space, because the bull run's over, man. We're sitting here at 95K. I don't know what's going on. We're crashing and burning. Everything's falling to the ground. As many of you know here, I'm just kidding around. If you were to tell me 3 months ago that we were going to crash to 95K, I would take that in an absolute heartbeat. We saw this rapid run up here, and we're seeing this drawdown here in this past month. I believe that's because the Fed has lined out that there's not going to be quite as many interest rate cuts as initially thought. But hey, you know what? Bitcoin still prevails. Bitcoin still stands on, and Bitcoin will continue to prosper here in the future. So, I mean, a slight drawdown that we're seeing to 95,000 is a blessing in disguise here. It's cheaper sats, and it's helping you unlock more of the power to stack more sats here per dollar. But another industry that I think has, kind of taken itself by, or has kind of taken a turn for the worst, is the health insurance industry. We've seen a lot of craziness in the health insurance industry lately. I'm not going to say it because we're on YouTube. Many of you know what I'm hinting at here. But if I were to tell you, you don't need health insurance to find awesome doctors, you can negotiate your bills and fund those bills through a cheaper payment through their peer-to-peer funding platform for less. Would you take it? Well, I've partnered up with the best option for you. I think it's CrowdHealth. You can go to joincrowdhealth.com and you can use promo code GreenCandle, where you can get 3 months at just $99. Then after that, it's $149. So still extremely cheap for you, where you can change the way that you're looking at health insurance. I think that health insurance is absolutely one of the most corrupt things that is in the United States right now. You can do that. You can sign up below. You can put in your email address, set up an appointment starting in this new year, and really get signed up and get ready to, really prepare and take your health insurance to the next level. And, even my buddy Jim here says, CrowdHealth is dope. They've got a great team. My buddy Jim's in the chat. So join Jim and I here, as we're both members of CrowdHealth. And I think that there's no better way to join a group of like-minded individuals that will help you get the health insurance that you need, get the care that you need, and you can do it all with a great group of a great team with CrowdHealth. But the true power of Bitcoin is holding it for the long term and properly cold storing it, right? So, I've got another great team, another great partner here, the Bitcoin Way, which will help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange. If it's feeling like a daunting task, you can go to thebitcoinway.com/greencandle. I'll help you out, get you a 30-minute consultation where you can go and check it all out. They're working literally around the clock for you. If you guys can't see, They have got literally times at all times of the day. The only days they aren't working are Christmas and Christmas Eve. And they've got literally times from 12 o'clock in the morning till 12 o'clock at night. Any day of the week, they're really working and pushing to get you as much help as you could possibly need to get your Bitcoin off an exchange. They've got plenty of times for you. So go ahead and check those guys out. They can help you get your computer properly secured from any potential cybersecurity attack and potentially get you a Plan B passport if that's what you're looking for. So join the movement. We've got another guy who's a proud member of CrowdHealth. We got Luke in the chat. So join Luke, Jim, and I here for CrowdHealth and get your Bitcoin off the exchange with the Bitcoin way. And remember, folks, with all of this, Nayib Bukele is taking a loan that the IMF is tossing money at them to say, hey, stop buying Bitcoin, stop this craziness. And his conviction is bringing him to buy more Bitcoin, utilize that loan to buy more Bitcoin. And you're bearish right now? How could you be? I'm not by any means. So I'm looking forward to a huge 2025. And I think that it is going to be absolutely electric. All of the nation state FOMO that we're going to see lining in, all of the businesses that we're going to see coming in. I mean, how can you not be bullish at this point? So thank you guys all for joining me. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I will see you guys all at the next one.